Hey viewers, this is Kerno Pictures Limited, here with a very sentimental book in my heart. It is the companion novel of the documentary series from 2011, Planet Dinosaur. The Next Generation Giant Killers, accompanying the landmark BBC series. From the Arctic to Africa, South America to Asia, discovered a new breed of giants, killers and weirdos revealed in the landmark BBC series. Spinosaurus, the biggest carnivore in history. Hatzegopteryx, giant winged pterosaur. Predator X, serial killer of the seas. Majungasaurus, the cannibal that killed to survive. Epidexipteryx, proud-bearded predator. And Troodon, the world's most intelligent dinosaur. This was £20 when I got this. When I saved up pocket money in the gift shop at the Natural History Museum in London. But it's to me it's sentimentally priceless. And it's seen better days, but I've done my best to repair the spine. Authored by Calvin Scott, paleontology specialist Dr. Darren Naish. Introduction. We are living in a golden age of dinosaur discoveries. Each year, our new fossil finds reveal brand new specimens of dinosaurs and bring quantum leaps to our knowledge and how and where these legendary monsters lived and died. The first dinosaurs evolved around 240 to 230 million years ago, during the middle of the Triassic period. But it wasn't until the beginning of the Jurassic period, about 40 million years later, they became the dominant creatures on Earth, occupying the roles once played by other reptile groups, and they stayed reigning supreme, developing new ways to exploit their environment and new ways to kill, until, with the exception of direct descendants, such cousins, the birds, they were wiped out by an earth-shattering event 65 million years ago, now 66 million years ago. In 1999, Walking with Dinosaurs first aired on BBC and revolutionised the way we thought about dinosaurs, using a mixture of computer-generated imagery, CGI, and animatronics to bring back the hulking monsters of prehistory to life. The dinosaurs' everyday lives were portrayed as we were watching a natural history documentary on a safari millions of years old. 12 years on, Planet Dinosaur picks up the story. CGI has moved on, but so has our understanding of life back in the Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous ages, aka my favourite television programme. Of course, there are still many secrets buried deep underground and more discoveries yet to be made. And while there are still many things we don't yet understand, there are exactly the sort of issues how that makes paleontology so exciting. Every new discovery opens up new possibilities and new ideas about how these spectacular creatures lived and died. As we see, some of the ideas involve extrapolation and clever lateral thinking. Scientists often struggle to understand the world as it once was. And so, when so many pieces of the puzzle are missing, experts often have to make the best possible guesses. Shh, I'm recording. The best possible guesses and evidence provided by the remains of the dinosaurs, other dinosaur species, and what we know of animals living today. Paleontologists don't always see eye to eye when it comes to the interpretation of the evidence, but they all share the same love of all things prehistoric. They also agree that Planet Dinosaur was a spectacular, if dangerous, place to live. The changing face of Planet Dinosaur. Middle and late Triassic. When the first dinosaurs evolved around 240 million years ago, the world looked very different. All dry land was grouped together in into the huge megacontinent Pangaea. Late Jurassic. Fast forward about 80 million years, and Pangaea had split into two immense land masses. The northern continent is called Laurasia, and the southern one is Gondwana. Late Cretaceous. As we later enter the late Cretaceous epoch, the world is looking more like the one we know today. Both Laurasia and Gondwana have broken up into smaller continents, and North and South America are separated by water. Europe 94 million years ago existed as an archipelago, warm, shallow seas covered by all the low-lying areas. The late Jurassic world, the late Cretaceous world. Jurassic jargon busting, explaining some of the main types of creatures you'll discover in Planet Dinosaur. Saurischians, Saur-is-ki-ans. One of the two main groups, dinosaur groups. Their pelvic bones were arranged much like those of lizards, hence the name, which means lizard-hipped. They share the proportionally long necks, a large thumb, and other detailed feature. Most kinds possess air-filled bones. Ornithischians, Ornithischians. The other main dinosaur group alongside the Saurischians, their pelvic bones were arranged much like those of modern birds, hence the name bird-hipped, but they did not include the ancestors of birds. Birds are actually Saurischians. Oviraptors, Oviraptorosaurs, a group of bird-like beaked theropods, some which boasted colourful plumage. Advanced kinds had toothless jaws, but were equipped with two tooth-like prongs in their palates. Paleontologists, paleontologist, an unusually intelligent modern primate that studies the fossilized remains of plants and animals, often found in digging bones out of the ground in harsh conditions or holed up in museums and universities. They don't always agree with each other. Pterosaurs, the earliest vertebrates known to have evolved true powered flight. Long arms and finger bones supported their membranous wings. Pterosaurs are often mistakenly identified as dinosaurs. This is incorrect. However, the so-called winged lizards were close relatives of dinosaurs. Sauropods. A group of especially long-necked plant-eating quadrupedal saurischians. The group included some of the largest animals to have ever lived. Their name means lizard foot. Theropods. Theropod. With a name that means beast foot, these bipedal saurischians dinosaurs were largely predatory, though so were omnivorous or herbivorous. Wishbones and feathers evolved within this group. During the Jurassic, the group of theropods called birds emerged, the only dinosaur group to survive beyond the end of the Cretaceous to present day. Tyrannosaurids. The tyrant lizards were the ultimate killers. Large-headed theropods with tiny arms, powerful hind legs, and massive, powerful jaws, lined with thickened, spike-like teeth. Tyrannosaurids belonged to the large group termed the Tyrannosauroids, the earliest members which were small feathered predators. The age of dinosaurs. See also the dinosaurs in context, pages 130 to 130, 230 to 232. 227 million years ago, late Triassic epoch, 205 MA, early Jurassic, 180 MA, middle Jurassic, 159 MA, late Jurassic, 144 MA, early Cretaceous, 99 MA, late Cretaceous, MA, million years ago. The new giants. It's only revealed that the biggest dinosaurs have ever lived, the icons of Planet Dinosaur, have been unearthed. How and why did these titans grow so immense, and could any animal attack these new giants? A giant discovery. Cracks begin to splinter across the surface of the egg. It shakes ever so slightly as the tiny creature fights to get out, thrashing against the brittle shell. The cracks widen and shatter as the top of the egg is finally pushed away. The infant slender neck unfurls as it breaks the sac of viscous liquid that has kept it alive so far. Argentinosaurus hatchling. The newly hatched dinosaur raises its head, feeling the warmth of the Cretaceous sun against its scales. Tentatively, it takes its first ever look at the outside world, squinting against the sudden alien brightness. As it struggles to focus to take in the desolate plains that stretch out under a brooding, stormy sky, it is cast in shadow. With a flap of leathery wings, death swoops in from above, from the sky. The hatchling looks up and straight into the eyes of a Cheiropterid pterosaur that has landed nearby, attracted to the myriad nests that dot the landscape. With a wingspan of over a meter, this aerial hunter is just as deadly on the ground as it was in the air. A Cheiropterid pterosaur. The hatchling cries out in alarm as the toothless beak snaps towards the nest. It dodges the Cheiropterid at first, but it won't evade it for long. Finally, the pterosaur manages to capture the hatchling in its beak. But the helpless infant is still slick with the fluid from within the egg and slips from the predator pterosaur's grip, tumbling back into the nest. The pterosaur's head bobs down again, but suddenly stops. The ground is vibrating to the sound of heavy footsteps. Something large is heading their way. The Cheiropterid's head snaps around to spy a large arbellisaurid dinosaur running towards the nest site. The flying reptile takes to the air. While it's happy to feed on helpless hatchlings, taking on a fully grown and probably quite angry parent is something else. Walking on eggs. In 1997, a joint team of paleontologists from the American Museum of Natural History in New York and the Carmen Funes Municipal Museum in Argentina were on the hunt for fossils in the heat of the Patagonian Badlands. Not expecting to find anything spectacular, they stepped on the mudstone flat, scouring the ground for telltale signs of fossils. 5 minutes later, they realized they had stumbled on something big. Excavating nest at Mahuevo. Sorry if I butchered that. Fossilized embryo. Amongst the tens, the team had discovered the biggest dinosaur nest in the world has ever seen, dating back to the late Cretaceous between 70 to 90 million years ago. The site stretched out for 7.6 square kilometers, a square mile, in front of them. It was so full of eggs that it was virtually impossible to take a step without crushing shell fragments between their feet. The amazed research team renamed the site to Mahuveo, after Huveos, the Spanish for eggs. Amongst the tens of thousands of eggs scattered across Mahuveo, many were unhatched. Amazingly, some even contained the embryonic remains of sauropods that had died millions of years ago. Exquisitely detailed, some of the embryos had even had fossilized skin on the bones, and articulated jaws, peg-shaped teeth, and tiny nostrils were all well preserved, enabling them to be identified as the member of the sauropod group Titanosauria. Death before life. Why did so many embryos die without hatching? In Cretaceous times, the Badlands would have looked very different, with streams crisscrossing the plains that often flooded. It's thought that the eggs at Mahuvo were victims of these floods. When the water subsides, the eggs were buried beneath thick silt. The mud protected the eggs, both from the elements and from the scavengers, such as the Chirogopterid. The same cycle probably happened on and off for more than a million years, meaning even more eggs may await discovery. The world's oldest dinosaur embryos. Whilst the embryos at Aku and Mehivo were a staggering find, much older remains have been unearthed elsewhere. In 1976, fossil eggs were discovered in South Africa that dated back to the early Jurassic, 190 million years ago, and contains skeletons of an unhatched Mastospondylus, a prosauropod that was an ancestor of the gargantuan sauropod, the remains of the oldest known embryos of any land-dwelling backboned animal. First, dangers. The baby dinosaur screams out in terror as an Albelisaurid tears towards it. The gigantic carnivore surveys the nest at its feet. Its nostrils flare as it drops its head to the hatchling. Almost tentatively, the giant picks up the quaking hatchling and up by its tail, only to whip it back against the ground, killing the defenseless creature instantly. Scorpio venator looms over the Argentinosaurus hatchling. If Titanosaur eggs did survive, there was no guarantee that infants would make it past their first hour of life. Hatchling sites throughout the world were dangerous places for newborns, as our hatchling found out. This is a Scorpio venator, a nest-raiding predator that scavenged for carrion and preyed on young dinosaurs. Scorpio venator didn't hunt for scorpions. It was given the name because of the abundance of living scorpions that scuttled around the excavation site that was when it was found. Discovery of Scorpio venator was partially exciting, as the skeleton was almost complete, lacking only the right forearm and the end half of its tail. Its skull was short and stout. Its skull is short, stout, and covered in ridges, furrows, and tubercles, bumpy nodules that scattered all over the head and most Albelisaurid theropods. It had short, stubby, near useless arms with strong legs with powerful thighs and sturdy shins over its 1.8 metric ton to imperial ton body was balanced. Its slender jaws housed rows of razor-sharp teeth. But Scorpio venator, like all bullies, probably picked on creatures its own size or much, much smaller. It certainly wouldn't take on the baby's true parent, one of the largest dinosaurs that have ever been found, Argentinosaurus. Walking with giants. Argentinosaurus huinculensis. Translation: Huincules Argentina lizard. Translation: Diet, herbivore, habitat, Argentina, era, late Cretaceous, classification, Saurischia, Sauropodomorpha, Sauropoda, Titanosauria, weight, 75 metric tons, 82.6 imperial tons, length, 33 to 35 meters, 108 to 115 feet. Pronunciation. Body. Argentinosaurus belongs to a subgroup of sauropods called Titanosauria, named after the titans of Greek myth. Thus, they included some of the heaviest dinosaurs that have ever lived. The interlocked vertebrae on its back acted like a bridge of bones that helped support its immense weight of the body. So far, only 5% of Argentinosaurus' skeleton has been excavated, but at least some of its bones were hollow. Was this to help reduce weight as it grew such a massive size? Head and neck. Like all sauropods, titanosaurs had small heads for their size, but the skull shape of titanosaurs were quite variable, and we aren't sure what the skull of Argentinosaurus looked like. We do know it had large bony nostrils, probably located higher up on the skull than actual fleshy nostrils. Its teeth were slim, pencil-like, and equipped with interlocking tips that were ideal for nipping away at vegetation. Incredibly, the long necks meant perhaps that giant sauropods could stand in one spot and still access a lot of food without needing to walk far. A great trick for conserving energy. Limbs. Robust, strongly muscled forelimbs mean the Argentinosaurus could cope with rough terrain. Tail. The flexible, incredibly muscular tail was probably used as third legs when rearing up on their back legs. Discovery. In 1988, an Argentine sheep farmer, Guillermo Herdia, discovered what he thought was a petrified tree trunk on his Patagonian farm. However, a close examination, Senor Herdia began to think he had found something more exciting. He was right. Paleontologists from the Carmen Funes Municipal Museum confirmed that his petrified wood was actually the 1.5 meter, 5-foot tibia or shin bone of a gigantic dinosaur. Excavation of the area began, and 2 years later, further evidence of the same dinosaur was unearthed. The team, led by dinosaur hunter Rodolfo Coria, found a rock they believed contained another monstrous fossil and spent days digging out of the ground. The massive hunk of rust-coloured rock was so heavy it took 5 men to manoeuvre it into place so that a crane could winch it onto a waiting truck. Amazing, the rock revealed just one fossil, a single backbone taller than an average human being. Other remains followed until paleontologists had exhausted Senor Herdia's farm. It wasn't much. A few vertebrae, the scarum, the part of the backbone that touches the pelvis, some shattered ribs, and a tibia. But it was enough to identify a new vegetarian giant. Not only the biggest dinosaur found so far, but also the biggest land-based animal of all time. Eating machine. From the moment Argentinosaurus hatchlings left the eggs, they needed to fend for themselves. The parent dinosaur was far too big to look after them. We know from the eggs at Aculmahivo, the titanosaur embryos had already had miniature teeth, was well suited for tearing into foliage. The larger an animal is, the faster it needs to grow. Argentinosaurus started life as 30 to 50 centimeters, 12 to 20 inches, and 5 kilograms, 11 pounds, weakling, and yet grew incredibly fast, reaching its adult weight of 75 tons, 82 imperial tons, in around 25 years. The speed of the growth varied at certain points in their lives, with a couple of growth spurts as babies and in its teen years. During these times, a titanosaur could put up to 40 kilograms, 88 pounds, every single day. A movable feast. To gain this much weight and then keep going while they were fully grown, a titanosaur would have to eat its way through almost around 100 kilograms, 220 pounds of vegetation every day. That's roughly my weight. I weigh 102 kilograms. But appetites this size could have cause problems, especially sauropods have lived in large herds. Very soon they would eat themselves out of house and home, stripping every bit of greenery from the land. Perhaps sauropods were constantly on the move, migrating from one area to another to find food, eating as they travelled. Dinosaur tracks. In 2002, the year I was born, a series of sauropod trackways were found in Alderley Quarry in Oxfordshire. Dating back to the middle part of the Jurassic, the tracks belong to around 40 dinosaurs that 143 million years ago walked together. The nearest source of food was over 20 kilometers, 12 miles away, so perhaps these behemoths were all wandering from one patch of food to another. Some experts think that at times sauropods could have covered 100 miles in their search for food, probably walking at speeds similar to those of elephants today. 6 things you need to know about sauropods. Sauropods were gigantic 4-legged dinosaurs that first appeared during the late Triassic, around 220 million years ago. They had tiny heads and incredibly long necks. Amongst the most famous sauropods are the Diplodocus and the Brachiosaurus. There were a lot more species of sauropods than we previously thought. The number of known sauropods has increased by 50% since 2002. Fossil records show that sauropods descended from 2-legged ancestors called prosauropods. One group of prosauropods evolved to a gigantic size and took to walking on the hand, eventually becoming dedicated quadrupeds. Until recently, experts thought that sauropods virtually died out at the end of the Jurassic period. This view now seems mistaken. Sauropods of several groups survived across the Jurassic-Cretaceous boundary, and some parts of the world remained important right up to the end of Cretaceous. The first sauropod fossils were discovered in Chipping, Norton, Oxfordshire in England in 1847. The Victorian anatomist Richard Owen named them Cetosaurus, meaning whale lizard. He mistakenly believed that they were aquatic animals similar to a crocodile. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed that sauropods were amphibious creatures that lived in swamps or in lakes. Today, we know that sauropods were strongly adapted for life in woodlands, plains, and other terrestrial habitats. Sauropods thrived until the mass extinction that wiped out all non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Now, in this book, it was 65. We now know it's 66. Why did sauropods grow so big? A number of evident evolutionary quirks suggests that probably explain how sauropods were able to grow such an immense sizes, although paleontologists don't agree to which were the most important. Bolting it down. Sauropods didn't chew their food. Instead, they stripped it down from the branches, swallowed it whole, and let their digestive systems do the hard work. That means they didn't need strong jaw muscles, and as a result, their heads and mouths remained comparatively small and lightweight. It means their necks could also grow so much longer than those of dinosaurs with big, heavy skulls. Argentinosaurus skeleton. Access to food. Sauropods were quite literally head and shoulders above the competition. Their long necks mean they could reach higher than any of their rivals to snack on high vegetation, and thereby avoiding competing with other plant-eating dinosaurs low to the ground. Some sauropods, such as Diplodocus, are believed to have reared up on their hind legs to reach even higher. Changing environment. When the Jurassic was arid and hot, the planet cooled in the Jurassic, resulting in an explosion of plant life. Lush forests sprung up, towering above the undergrowth, creating a food source that could be exploited exclusively by the sauropods. Open country. During the key phases of sauropod evolution in the late Triassic and Jurassic, the world's land masses was mostly united in 2 supercontinents, Pangaea in the north and Gondwana in the south. These vast, unbroken and massive land masses gave sauropods the opportunity to establish massive territories in which to feed continuously. Some low metabolism. Some scientists have suggested that sauropods might have much lower metabolism than big mammals evolved much later on. This means that sauropods would have needed relatively little energy to survive and grow. Then perhaps they were especially good at diverting energy from their food into growth. Body heat. The bigger the body mass, the longer it takes to warm up or cool down. Sauropod bodies were so big that they naturally retained heat. Sauropods might have evolved ever larger size to take advantage of this ability, which might have allowed them to be active and without having constantly to eat their body weight in vegetation. Higher metabolism. Nothing is simple in dino research. Higher metabolism? Nothing is simple in dinosaur research. Some scientists have argued that sauropod metabolism was high and that they were able to reproduce faster, grow faster, eat faster, and digest food faster than any other animals. These advantages may have been linked to the evolution of giant size. Invulnerability. The bigger the sauropods grew, the less vulnerable they became. Even the fiercest predators would think twice before attacking such huge creatures. But what if more than one hunter attacked them at a time? Head held high. How did sauropods hold their necks? Traditionally, museums and films have portrayed giant creatures holding their necks in front of their body in a horizontal position. In 2009, Dr. Mike Taylor and Darren Naish at the University of Portsmouth in the UK and Matthew Weddell at the Western University of Health Sciences, California, argued this was a mistake. Taylor and his colleagues examined modern creatures such as rabbits, turtles and crocodiles and discovered that, with a few exceptions, most hold their necks in an upright S-shaped curve. Because there's no good reason thinking that sauropods represent a particularly special exception, Taylor and his colleagues argued sauropods did the same, habitually holding their necks high, a bit like a swan. Other scientists disagree with this hypothesis. Australian scientist Dr. Roger Seymour has claimed that an sauropod carried heat upright and would need extraordinarily high blood pressure in order to pump blood to its brain. Darren Naish is also the one who co-authored this book, and notice me on Twitter. Dinosaur death pits. Living alongside giants was a dangerous business for smaller animals. Extraordinary discoveries made in 2010 have revealed how following in someone's footprint wasn't always a good idea in the Mesozoic world. 10 years previously, Dr. David A. Ethbert at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, Alberta, Canada, Shang Su at the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology, IVVB, in Beijing, China, and James Clark at the North Washington University, Washington, D.C., USA, have been searching for fossils in the upper Jurassic rocks of northwestern China's Yishang Formation, which they found in 3 large pits of the sediments. Ranging from 1 to 2 meters, 3 to 6 feet in depth, the pits presented something of a puzzle. The first pit was chock-a-block full of small theropod dinosaurs. Another contained the bodies of 9 small plant-eating dinosaurs, 4 mammals, 2 crocodilians, and a turtle. That wasn't all. The remains were piled up on top of each other, as if someone stacked the dead bodies up in some sort of macabre grave. Uneven ground. The 3 piles of fossilized skeletons were excavated as vertical columns, jacketed in plaster and packed in wooden crates ready to shipping for the IPP's facility near Beijing. There, the scientists examined the samples. They found that the rock itself was a strange mix of volcanic mudstone and sandstone. It seemed that the ground itself had been churned up by those around the same time as the dinosaurs and other small animals that had died. Jurassic marshland. It was obvious that no predator was responsible for this death. There were no sign of trauma, and on the way in which skeletons were laid on top of each other suggested that animals could have fallen into the pit one after another. But that didn't make quite sense either. Today, where the area the bone-filled pits were found in the part of the Gobi Desert. But back during the late Jurassic, it was a hot, humid, marshy wetland. It wasn't the kind of place normally dotted with big gaping holes ready to trap unsuspecting dinosaurs. Besides, while dinosaurs may have not been the smartest creatures ever to walk the earth, surely they wouldn't have spotted the death traps. Death pool. A herd of Argentinosaurus is on the move, trudging across an ash-covered swamp. Relatively tiny hypsilophodonts dart between the feet of the giants. Each titanic footfall cracks through the ash crust, creating a massive footprint-sized pit of quicksand. 2 of the hypsilophodonts don't notice the danger ahead and fall into a sticky footprint. They sink into watery gaze as the Argentinosaurus march on. Poor guys and gals. Hidden dangers. The presence of volcanic mudstone gave the scientists a vital clue as to what might have happened. As the Jurassic period drew to a close, the Yishang area was affecting almost continuous volcanic activity. The volcanoes of the region regularly blew their tops, sending molten rock and ash high into the sky. But when fell onto Earth, the ash thickened, creating a semi-solid surface that coated the swamp. Beneath this crust lay thick, gloopy mud. Most dinosaurs would have walked unawares over this new surface, but what if it cracked beneath their weight? The crowned dragon. Could the dinosaurs trapped within the pit have caused the volcanic crust to give way? It was doubtful. The largest skeleton found belonged to a species first named in 2006. One long, I can't pronounce that, an early member of the Tyrannosauroid group, hence a distant relative of North America's Tyrannosaurus rex. One long ran on 2 muscular legs and boasted an impressive crest on its head, an unusual feature for carnivorous dinosaurs. However, it was much smaller It was much, much smaller than its famous relative, standing only 26 inches tall, and the Tyrannosauroid would have weighed around 40 kilograms, 88 pounds, hardly enough to crack through the ash crust. The culprit, a more likely suspect, is the region's giant sauropod, Mamenchisaurus. I can't pronounce the last word. This behemoth, one of the largest sauropods ever discovered, has another claim to fame. This was the owner of the longest necks in history, stretching for nearly 12 meters, 40 feet. That's over half the length of its entire body, which it probably weighed over 50 tons. Metric tons, 55 imperial tons, more than enough to crack the ashy surface. Hips, ligaments held at the neck and tail in a place at the hip, anchoring them like a living suspension bridge. Legs, whilst the bones of its tail, body and neck were light and hollow, its hefty leg bones were thick and solid. Neck. Mamenchisaurus had more neck vertebrae than any known dinosaur. Its neck was almost half the length of its entire body.
So am I going to read the entire book?
Yes, I am. Can't you tell? Sorry for being rude. Treacherous tracks. It seems that the Mamenchisaurus strode across the Yishang Plain, its massive feet punched through the volcanic crust. The swampy mud between immediately oozed the resulting hollows, making them almost impossible to spot, but deadly to cross. It would have been like stepping into quicksand. A thoroughbred Wang Long wouldn't have stood a chance. Unable to climb out, with nothing near to grab onto, it would have thrashed in the mud and gradually been sucked down to its death. Wang Long had feathers, and these would have been clogged with mud, weighing the animal down even more. Quadrupedal animals, able to use their strong front legs to clamber out, might have more luck escaping. There's even a chance that as the death pit piled up with corpses, other dinosaurs could have escaped the quagmire by standing on the piles of entombed bodies. River of Giants. Some of the biggest dinosaur discoveries are all down to being at the right place at the right time, even if it's completely by accident, discovering a giant. In 2001, the year before I was born, a team from the University of Pennsylvania was searching for a very special site that had originally been discovered by Bavarian geologist Ernst Stromer von Reinbach in the early 20th century. Stromer had been written up by his findings between 1915 and 1936, but the fossils he had found were destroyed during the Second World War, and the exact location of Stromer's site was no longer known for sure. Knowing the site was somewhere in an area known as the Barrier Oasis, the team worked out where they thought the exact location of the site might be, punched in the coordinates on their global positioning system, and set off into the deserts. But they had made a mistake. In their excitement, they had entered the wrong coordinates and landed miles away from their targets. Hopelessly lost, they stood out their 4x4 to look for recognizable landmarks. They couldn't find one. Instead, jutting out of the ground was a large bone. A year later, the team returned to the site, and over the next 3 weeks managed to excavate 3.5 tons, metric tons, 7 imperial tons of rock. Most bones were unearthed, as were the remains of what looked like a 100-year-old camp. There were all boots, tin cans, and German newspaper. Was this Stromer's lost dig? The bones found at the site was proved to represent a new species of Titanosaurian. As a tribute in 2001, the giant dinosaur was named after Stromer. This was Paralotitan stromeri. In the dry season, food and water were concentrated along the banks of the so-called River of Giants. A herd of the Titanosaur Paralotitan approached the water's edge, desperate to quench their thirst. Cautiously, the Titanosaurs lowered their tiny heads to drink. But rivers are dangerous places. A crocodilian launches itself out of the murky water, almost catching a hold of a Paralotitan's neck. More crocodilian bodies break the surface of the water. Sensing the threat, the members of the Paralotitan herd withdraw to a safe distance, or so they think. Beneath the surface is an even bigger danger approaching. This is Sarcosuchus imperator. Sarcosuchus imperator. Pronunciation. Translation: Flesh crocodile emperor, diet carnivore, habitat North Africa, era the early Cretaceous, classification Crocodilomorphs, Mesocrocodilia, Neosuchia, Pholisauridae. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Weight 8 metric tons, 8.8 imperial tons. Length 12 meters, 40 feet. A long and violent life. Growth lines like those found in tree trunks are evident in the scutes. It seems that new ones were laid down every year. Paul Serrano's team examined that the armor plates of an adult Sarcosuchus had grown to 80% of its potential size and found that it had been alive for 50 to 60 years. That's about twice the lifespan of crocodilians today, including the saltwater, currently the largest reptile on Earth. At 8 tons, Sarcosuchus was 10 times as heavy as the heaviest living crocodile. Its spine was made up of 85 individual vertebrae. The tail was the most flexible part, and the back region may have been specifically stiffened. 2 rows of 35 armor plates, or scutes, each measured around 30 centimeters, 1 foot in length, covered Sarcosuchus's back. Its stomach would have contained bones, contained storage stones to help grind up the bone and hide that the creature had swallowed. Head and jaws. Sarcosuchus's head was as much as 1.82 meters, 6 feet long. That's 8 centimeters below my height. Its snout ended up in a huge bowl-shaped depression known around the nostrils. We're not sure what this was for, but one idea is that it might have housed a large resonating chamber, just like that of the present in living male gharials, which used them to make their mating bellows louder. Sarcosuchus's powerful jaws were lined with 132 teeth. The stoutest of their teeth were only twice as tall as they were wide. They were strong and good at resisting bending. They would have been perfect for catching fish and also for crushing bone. Discovery. In 1964, French paleontologist Albert Felix de, how do you pronounce that, discovered a number of conical teeth, vertebrae, and some 30 centimeter, 12-inch long scutes when mapping out a remote part of a desert in Niger. They could have come from an enormous crocodilian, likes of which had never been seen before. The creature was named Sarcosuchus imperator, flesh crocodile emperor. Though numerous additional remains were discovered in the following decades, the most speculative of those were excavated in the University of Chicago's Paul Serrano and his colleagues as the expedition of 1997 and 2000. Traveling to the remote spot location described as traveling to the remote spot locals describe as the place camels fear to tread, and braving temperatures that appropriated 32 degrees Celsius, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, they were awarded with several skulls, vertebrae, scutes, and limb bones. Together, these represented approximately 50% of Sarcosuchus' skeleton. This was finely enough to work out the size of this colossal crocodilian. How did Sarcosuchus hunt? Could Sarcosuchus really have bitten down through the thick hides and bones of dinosaurs? Modern crocodilians are ambush predators. They lie silently in the water, waiting patiently for an animal to swim past before striking, rearing up and clamping their powerful jaws around prey. They drag the struggling creature back beneath the water to drown. Sarcosuchus probably hunted in the same way. Whilst it fed on smaller fish and crustaceans in the water, it would also lie in wait to ambush larger prey. Its eye sockets pointed upwards, much like those of the modern Indian gharial. This meant that it could hide its mammoth body beneath the surface of the water, just as its eyes visible just above the surface. From this vantage point, it would have kept watch, waiting to lurk with deadly force. Paul Serrano and his team had proposed that, via a combination of the element of surprise, a robust skull, and a massive sharp conical fangs at the tip of its jaws, Sarcosuchus could have been a dinosaur killer. Overbite of the sharp incisor. Sarcosuchus skull. North Africa. Bite force. In 2003, Greg Erickson, a biologist at Florida State University, published with his colleagues an examination of the bite force seen in living crocodilians. The results were impressive. Erickson's team wrestled with more than 60 crocodiles and alligators at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm and Zoological Park in Florida. Crocodilians at the park were caught and brought out into the water, and then encouraged to bite down on the bar, a 2 meter, 6 feet 6 inch long metal rod covered in leather and kitted out with a device at the end that measures the pressure exerted by the bite. It was a dangerous job, as the vet had to sit on the reptile's back when the reading was taken. All it would take was one croc to make a run for it while biting down, and the 6 £100,000 equipment would have been smashed to smithereens. As you might expect,